We're going to talk about inductive reasoning, which is really just finding a pattern and being able to predict what's going to happen next. As always, if this video helps you, please like and subscribe for more help in geometry and all other types of math. So let's say, for example, that we had some pattern like this. So the first thing we're going to look for, I would always look, kind of as you're starting off for this, is there some common addition happening or subtraction happening or multiplication happening or division? That's kind of my way of running through. You know, look for those basic four operations. Now here you'll see that we're adding 3 every time. Right? We're going adding 3, add 3, add 3. So if you were asked, like, what's the pattern? You would say, well, you're just adding 3 every time. And oftentimes then you're asked, predict the next number. Okay, well, the next number, add 3, would be 13. So let's say we had something like this. So again, I would kind of run through your operations, say, well, I'm, adding 9, adding 90, that isn't it. I'm not subtracting. Multiply by 10, multiply by 10, multiply by 10. So again, if you said, well, what's the pattern? I am multiplying by 10 every time. And then what would the next term be? Well, if you multiplied 1,000 by 10, you'd get 10,000. That would be your next term. Let's say we had something like this. So again, running through your operations, obviously you're not adding. Now I should kind of say here that I would say, okay, you're subtracting 5. Some might say, well, that means you're adding a negative 5. That's fair. That's the same operation. But it certainly looks like we're just subtracting 5 every time. So I would say, okay, subtracting 5. But again, you could say, or that's the same as adding a negative 5. So if we want to continue this pattern and subtract off another 5, would be at negative 10. And lastly, let's do this. So adding, subtracting, well, you subtract 50, but that pattern doesn't continue. You're not necessarily, going down by a constant amount. Again, kind of similar to our adding a negative, I would look at this and say, well, it looks like you're dividing by 2 every time. But a lot of people would say, well, that's multiplying by 1/2. And I might tend to want to write it that way, to be honest. So you could say either, well, I'm dividing by 2, or I'm multiplying by 1/2. Same type of thing. So if you did 12.5 divided by 2, you would get 6.75. Now, because it's geometry, we shouldn't limit ourselves necessarily to just numbers, although that's oftentimes how you're looking at patterns, of course, in math. But if instead, I said something like, well, we've got this pattern going, we've got something like that, I might start to look at, and they'd say, well, what's the pattern? This is a triangle. It has 3 sides. This is a quadrilateral. It has 4 sides. I meant this to be a pentagon with 5 sides. So, what are you doing every time? Well, you're adding a side. So what would be next? Well, it would be a hexagon. Like that, with 6 sides. Or maybe you had something like this, like what's the pattern? Well, I would look at this and say, well, everything's a square. You're just moving the shaded, or moving the shaded corner kind of counterclockwise every time. So I would say the next pattern would be putting it back up in here. So it's not always going to be numbers, although most of what we will probably talk about in math is numbers, but you certainly could also do this with shapes, and in geometry that would be pretty common.